I paid my family's bills for years while being treated like I didn't matter. Then my parents told me to sleep in the garage, so my sister's boyfriend could take my room. I cut off all payments and disappeared. I am 33 male now, but this story really starts when I was about 20. I grew up in a cramped two-story house with my parents, Roberto and Marisol, my older sister Valeria, and my younger brother, Mateo. From the moment I could walk, I knew exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. Dead last. Valeria was the undisputed princess. She could literally burn the house down, and somehow it would be my fault for not watching her closely enough. Everything she touched turned to gold in my parents' eyes. New clothes? Valeria needs them for her image? Money for going out? Well, Valeria worked so hard at her part-time job at the nail salon. She deserves to have fun. I remember when I was 16, I'd been saving money from my grocery store job for months to buy a used motorcycle. I had almost enough when Valeria decided she absolutely needed a designer purse for graduation. Mom came to me with tears in her eyes explaining how important this was for Valeria's self-esteem. Before I knew it, my motorcycle fund had become Valeria's purse fund. When I protested, Dad told me I was being selfish and that family comes first. Apparently, family only went one direction in our house. Then there was Mateo, the golden boy who never worked a day in his life, but somehow always had the latest sneakers and video games. He was too smart for manual labor, too creative for regular jobs, and finding himself through his early 20s. Spoiler alert, he's still looking. Mateo had this magical talent for disappearing whenever there was work to be done around the house. And me, I was the family workhorse. I fixed things when they broke, picked up extra shifts when bills got tight, and never complained when dinner was gone by the time I got home from work. I learned early that love in my family was conditional, and my condition was simple. Shut up and pay up. When I turned 20, everything changed overnight. Dad got fired from his job at the shipping dock after one too many sick days that mysteriously coincided with major sporting events. Suddenly, the bills were stacking up like a house of cards in a windstorm, and everyone looked at me with those expectant eyes. I didn't have a choice. I dropped out of community college where I was studying business administration and picked up a job at the local steel manufacturing plant. The work was brutal. 12 to 14-hour shifts in blazing heat lifting heavy machinery parts until my arms felt like they were going to fall off. I'd come home covered in sweat and grime, my hands torn up from handling rough steel. But here's what really gets me angry. Every single paycheck went straight into that house. Not just my fair share, but pretty much everything except what I needed for gas and fast food, the mortgage, utilities, groceries, and somehow always some emergency expense that usually involved something Valeria absolutely had to have. The worst part wasn't even the money. It was the complete lack of acknowledgement. Not once did anyone say thank you. I was just the machine that produced money. And as long as the money kept coming, nobody cared about the machine. 3 years into this nightmare, I was ready to lose my mind. I was 23 years old and felt like I was 50. My hands were permanently stained from steelwork. My back ached constantly, and I hadn't had a real conversation with anyone outside of work orders in months. That's when I started my secret project. I'd always been good with numbers and had a head for business from my brief time in college, so I started studying. Every night after work, when everyone else was watching TV or going out, I was in my room with library books learning about real estate investment and business management. I kept them hidden under my bed so nobody would ask questions. I started small, really small. I took the tiny bit of money I managed to save each month and began flipping items online. Old electronics that people threw away, furniture I could fix up, anything I could buy, low and sell high. I'd spend lunch breaks at the steel plant browsing online marketplaces looking for deals. Weekends were spent driving around to garage sales searching for hidden gems. Most nights I got maybe 4 hours of sleep. The first year was rough. I made maybe an extra $100 a month. But when you're living paycheck to paycheck, it was everything. I kept every dollar secret, hiding it in a safety deposit box across town where nobody would recognize me. By 25, my little operation had grown into something bigger. I was buying damaged appliances from repair shops, fixing them up and reselling them for serious profit. I learned everything from YouTube videos, how to repair washing machines, fix refrigerators, restore furniture. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was using the same hands my family took for granted to build something they had no idea existed. Then I made the jump that changed everything. I took every penny I'd saved over 2 years, about $8,000, and bought my first rental property, a tiny duplex in a rough part of town. But the numbers worked. Within 6 months, I bought another property, then another. I developed a system. Buy distressed properties, fix them up myself, rent them out, then use the equity to buy more. By 27, I owned 12 rental units and was clearing over $6,000 a month in passive income. But I was still handing my parents the same $800 monthly rent and pretending I was barely getting by. The performance was exhausting but necessary. The hardest part was keeping the secret. I'd get calls from tenants during the day and have to pretend it was a telemarketer. I kept driving the same beat-up Honda Civic, even though I could afford to buy a luxury car with cash. Why the secrecy? Because I knew my family. The moment they found out I had real money, they'd find new ways to spend it. Valeria would need a car, then a better car, then a house. Mateo would have sudden inspiration for business ideas requiring startup capital. They'd drain me dry and still expect me to be grateful for the privilege. By age 30, I wasn't just successful, I was wealthy. My real estate portfolio had grown to 45 properties across 3 cities, including commercial buildings and strip malls. My monthly income was over $28,000 from rentals alone, plus another $15,000 from my property management company. I had employees, bank relationships, and a reputation as a serious player in real estate. The contrast between my two lives was staggering. During business hours, I was making deals worth hundreds of thousands, wearing expensive suits, and handling calls involving more money than my family saw in a year. But at home, I was still Lucas, the steelworker who barely made ends meet. I'd actually quit the plant 2 years earlier, but told my family I was working different shifts. Instead, I spent my days managing my business empire, from a rented office changing clothes there to maintain the charade. Every month, I'd hand over that same $800 and listen to lectures about contributing more or getting a better job. Dad would mutter about my lack of ambition. The irony was almost funny. I was probably making more than everyone in our neighborhood combined, but getting treated like the family failure. I started documenting everything during this period, every dollar I contributed, every expense I covered, every financial request. I photographed receipts, saved text messages asking for money, and kept detailed logs. I had a feeling I might need these records someday. The breaking point came when Valeria announced she was dating someone new. Carlos showed up one evening with that cocky swagger of someone who'd never worked for anything. Designer clothes, weak handshake, shifty eyes, and charm that screamed trouble. Within a week, Carlos was practically living at our house. He didn't work, claiming to be between opportunities and networking for his next big break. He had vague stories about business deals about to close while being perfectly comfortable, letting my paychecks subsidize his lifestyle. He'd order expensive takeout, monopolize the TV, and even complain about the cable package while I was paying the bill. The guy was living off my money and had the audacity to critique the service. I should have seen it coming, but somehow I was still shocked when it happened. I'd had a particularly long day dealing with a difficult tenant who was trying to break their lease, followed by a meeting with my lawyer about a potential new property acquisition. The tenant situation had been stressful. They were claiming the property had issues that weren't my responsibility, and I'd spent hours documenting the condition of the unit and reviewing the lease terms. The lawyer meeting had been more positive, discussing a strip mall purchase that could significantly expand my commercial portfolio. I was tired, stressed, and looking forward to just collapsing in my room and maybe watching something mindless on my laptop. I'd been thinking about finally telling my family the truth about my success. Maybe it was time to stop hiding and start helping them in a more substantial way. I'd even considered offering to pay off the house entirely as a surprise. I walked into the house around 9:30 p.m. on a Friday night, and immediately something felt off. The house was too quiet, but there were voices coming from upstairs from my room. I climbed the stairs, and as I got closer, I could hear Carlos laughing about something. There was music playing, something loud and obnoxious that I definitely hadn't left on. I opened my bedroom door and felt like I'd walked into an alternate reality. My desk was gone, my bookshelf was gone, my bed was gone. In their place was Carlos's stuff, his clothes scattered around, his shoes kicked into the corner, his cologne creating a cloud that made my eyes water. There were empty bottles on what used to be my nightstand, and the walls had been redecorated with his posters of sports cars and provocative images. And there he was, lying on a completely different bed, a king-size bed that definitely hadn't been in my room that morning, scrolling through his phone like he owned the place. When he saw me, he didn't even have the decency to look embarrassed. If anything, he looked amused. "Hey man," he said, barely glancing up from his phone. "This is my room now. Your sister and parents set it up. Pretty sweet setup, right? Way better than that twin bed you had. This is a real man's room." Before I could even process what was happening, my mother appeared in the doorway with that fake, cheerful voice she used when she was about to deliver bad news. "Oh, Lucas. Good, you're home. We moved your things to the garage to give Carlos some space while he gets back on his feet. It's temporary, of course, just until he finds his own place. Isn't that nice of us to help out Valeria's boyfriend, the garage?" She said it like she was offering me a promotion, instead of literally making me homeless in my own house. The garage that smelled like motor oil and had no insulation, where the temperature was either freezing or sweltering depending on the season, where there was barely enough room to walk around my father's broken-down motorcycle and boxes of Christmas decorations from 1995. I looked around my former room, the room I'd been living in since I was a kid, the room where I'd spent countless nights studying business plans and researching real estate deals, the room I'd technically been paying for as part of my monthly contribution to the household. They'd even moved my dresser, my small TV, my books, everything. It was like I'd never existed in this space. "Where's my stuff?" I asked, my voice surprisingly calm. "In the garage," Mom repeated, gesturing vaguely. "Downstairs. We set up a nice little area for you. It'll be like having your own apartment, very independent and grown up. A nice little area in the garage for the guy who'd been single-handedly keeping the family financially afloat for the past decade." That's when Dad chimed in from downstairs. "If you don't like it, you can find somewhere else to live. Carlos is family now, and family takes care of family." The words hit me like a physical blow. After everything I'd done, everything I'd sacrificed, everything I'd given up to keep this family together, they were literally willing to throw me out for some guy who'd been around for 3 weeks. Carlos was family, but I wasn't. The guy paying all their bills wasn't family, but the guy sleeping with their daughter was. I stood there for maybe 30 seconds, just taking it all in. Carlos had gone back to his phone, occasionally chuckling at whatever he was watching. Mom was looking at me expectantly, probably waiting for me to thank her for the generous garage accommodation. Dad was still grumbling from downstairs about ungrateful kids and how I should be happy they were letting me stay at all. And that's when it hit me. I didn't have to take this anymore. For the first time in my adult life, I had options they didn't know about. I had money assets, independence, everything I needed to walk away from this situation completely. I didn't say another word. I walked to the garage, which was indeed a pathetic joke of a living space. They'd pushed some boxes aside and put my mattress on the concrete floor. My desk was shoved against the wall, barely accessible behind Dad's old tools and a pile of paint cans. My clothes were in garbage bags like I was homeless. They'd even managed to break my bedside lamp during the move, but I didn't care about any of that anymore. I grabbed my laptop, my important documents, and enough clothes for a few days. Everything else could stay. They could keep my books, my furniture, my TV, everything. I was done. I walked past Carlos's room, my former room, and could hear him on the phone bragging to someone about his sweet new setup. I drove straight to the nicest hotel in the city and booked their best suite for a month. The penthouse suite cost more per night than I supposedly made in a week, but I paid with cash and didn't blink. While sitting in a room that probably cost more per night than my family spent on groceries in a week, I started making phone calls. First, call the electric company. I need to remove my name from the account at this address immediately. The customer service representative was helpful but confused. Sir, this will leave the account without a primary holder. Are you sure you want to do this? Absolutely certain. Remove my name and my payment authorization today. Second, call the water department. Same message, same confusion from their end. Third, call internet provider. Same thing. Sir, this will result in service termination. The other residents should contact us to establish new service. Perfect. That's exactly what I want. Fourth, call my bank to stop the automatic mortgage payment that came out of my account every month. My banker was particularly concerned about this one. Lucas, you've been making these payments for years. Are you sure this is what you want to do? This could affect your credit if the mortgage goes into default. It's not my mortgage. My name isn't on the deed. I've just been making payments out of the goodness of my heart. That goodness has officially expired. By midnight, I'd severed every financial connection to that house. For the first time in over a decade, not a single penny of my money would go toward keeping my family comfortable. I felt lighter than I had in years. The next morning, I called my real estate agent, a woman who'd helped me buy several properties and had no idea I was supposedly a broke steelworker living with my parents. I told her I wanted to buy a condo, and I wanted it fast. What's your budget, Lucas? Whatever it takes to get the nicest place available. I want to pay cash and close within 2 weeks. Cash? Lucas, are you talking about a loan pre-approval or actual cash? Actual cash. I want to wire the money the day we agree on a property. And the silence on the other end was telling. Then I'll start looking immediately. Within 2 weeks, I'd purchased a 3,200 square foot penthouse on the 32nd floor of the newest luxury building downtown. The place was incredible. Floor-to-ceiling windows with panoramic city views, hardwood floors that probably cost more than most people's cars, a kitchen with professional-grade appliances, and a master bathroom bigger than my old bedroom. The building had a concierge, a fitness center, a rooftop pool, and private elevators that required a key card to access the top floors. I paid cash, the whole thing, $680,000 just like that. The real estate agent, my lawyer, the building management. Everyone was impressed by the speed and simplicity of the transaction. No financing, no contingencies, just a straightforward purchase by someone who clearly had their finances in order. Moving in was surreal. I'd gone from a garage with a mattress on the floor to a penthouse with more space than I knew what to do with. Every morning, I'd drink coffee on my balcony looking out over the city, thinking about my family waking up in their house that was about to become a very different place. It took exactly 9 days for reality to hit them. That's how long it took for the first utility shutoff notice to arrive. The electric company doesn't mess around. They give you a final notice, and then it's lights out. My phone started ringing on day 10. Valeria's number flashed on my screen, but I let it go to voicemail. Then she called again and again. By the end of the first day, I had 17 missed calls from her. The voicemails were something else. They started confused. Lucas, there's some mistake with the electric bill. Can you call them? They're saying the account is in your name, but you canceled it? That doesn't make sense. Then they got frustrated. Lucas, why aren't you answering? We need you to fix this. Carlos tried calling them, but they won't talk to him because he's not on the account. You need to call them back right now. By the end, they were getting desperate. Lucas, please call back. The power is going to get shut off and Carlos has important business calls to make. This isn't funny anymore. But I didn't call back. Not that day or the next or the day after that. I was too busy enjoying my new life. I'd wake up in my king-size bed with Egyptian cotton sheets, work out in the building's gym, have breakfast on my balcony, while reading the financial news, then spend my day managing my properties and investments. The power got shut off on day 14. That's when Dad called. His voicemail was typical Dad, gruff and demanding. Lucas, whatever games you're playing, cut it out. Get down here and fix this mess. Carlos is trying to run a business from here, and you're sabotaging him. This is childish, and you're embarrassing the family. Still didn't call back. I was too busy closing on another property, a small apartment complex, that would add another $4,000 to my monthly income. The water got shut off 3 days later. Now Mom was calling, her voice shaky and confused. Mijo, please, we don't understand what's happening. Come home so we can figure this out together. Carlos says maybe someone stole your identity. We need to fix this as a family. Home. That was rich. The place where they'd literally kicked me out of my own room wasn't my home anymore. By the end of the month, they were facing foreclosure. The mortgage company doesn't care why you missed a payment. They just want their money. And when you've missed 2 payments in a row after years of on-time payments, they start the legal process fast. That's when the floodgates opened. My phone was getting dozens of calls and texts every day, not just from my immediate family, but from extended relatives who'd heard about the emergency. Aunts and uncles I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly very concerned about my well-being and asking if I knew what was happening to my poor parents. The texts from Valeria got increasingly frantic. Where are you? Carlos left and everything is falling apart. Mom is crying every day. The bank is taking the house. Please come home. We're sorry about the room thing. Okay, just help us. That last one almost made me laugh. The room thing, like they'd accidentally moved my toothbrush instead of literally making me homeless for a guy who'd bailed the second things got tough. While my family was dealing with their new reality, I was doing some research. It's amazing what you can find out about someone when you know where to look and have the money to pay for proper background checks. Carlos, it turned out, was quite the character. His real name was Carlos Martinez, and he had an impressive collection of outstanding debts, unpaid child support, and a history of moving in with vulnerable women before disappearing when things got complicated. He'd been evicted from his last 3 addresses and had multiple lawsuits pending against him for various financial schemes. The background check revealed a pattern going back 7 years. He'd find women who were financially stable but emotionally vulnerable, charm his way into their lives, then gradually take over their living situations. In most cases, he'd convince them to kick out roommates or family members to make room for his business operations. Once he'd established himself, he'd start running up debts in their names or using their addresses for various scams. My family had literally kicked out their main source of income to make room for a professional con artist. The irony was almost too perfect. I also learned that Carlos had been telling people around town that he was living rent-free with his rich girlfriend's family and bragging about how easy it was to manipulate desperate people. One of my business associates mentioned hearing some guy talking about how he'd convinced a family to give him free room and board while he figured out his next move. The next move apparently was skipping town the moment he realized the free ride was over. According to my sources, he'd left town the same day the power got shut off, taking with him several valuable items from the house, including Dad's watch collection and Mom's jewelry box. 2 months after I'd cut off their funding, my family was in complete freefall. They'd been evicted from the house that had been in our family for 15 years, the house that I'd been paying for without recognition or thanks for over a decade. The eviction process had been swift and brutal. Without my mortgage payments, they'd fallen behind immediately. They tried to cover the payments with their combined incomes, but Dad's part-time work, Mom's occasional cleaning jobs, Valeria's salon work, and Mateo's complete lack of employment weren't enough to cover even half of what I'd been contributing. They ended up in a 2-bedroom apartment in the worst part of town, the kind of place where you don't go out after dark and you always lock your car doors. The apartment was barely 800 square feet with thin walls, broken fixtures, and a constant smell of cigarettes from the neighboring units. Dad had found work as a night security guard at a warehouse, making about 1/3 of what he used to make at the docks. The work was lonely and boring, and at his age, standing for 8 hours a night was taking a toll on his health. Mom was cleaning offices downtown, leaving the house at 4 a.m. and coming home exhausted and sore. The work was physically demanding, and she'd never done manual labor before. Her hands were getting rough, her back ached constantly, and she'd aged visibly in just a few months. Valeria had to get a real job for the first time in her life, working the register at a discount clothing store, dealing with difficult customers, and standing on her feet for 8-hour shifts. The weekly salon visits and expensive dinners were just memories now. She'd gone from being the pampered princess to just another retail worker struggling to make ends meet. The stress was showing. Her skin had broken out, she'd gained weight from eating cheap food, and her confidence had evaporated. Mateo was delivering food on a scooter, finally contributing something to the household income instead of just consuming it. He'd never held a real job before, and the reality of working for tips in all weather conditions was a harsh introduction to adult responsibility. His dreams of being too good for manual labor had crashed into the reality of needing to pay rent. I kept tabs on all of this through mutual acquaintances and social media. Valeria's Instagram went from carefully curated photos of restaurant meals and new outfits to silence. She hadn't posted anything in weeks. When she did post, it was generic motivational quotes about staying strong and better days ahead. The family that had once treated me like their personal ATM was now discovering what it felt like to actually work for their money. And honestly, I felt nothing. No guilt, no sadness, no urge to swoop in and save them. They'd made their choice when they picked Carlos over their own family member, Now they were living with the consequences. After 3 months of silence, I decided it was time for the final act. I called my mother's cell phone on a Tuesday evening. She answered on the first ring like she'd been waiting by the phone. Lucas? Oh my God. Lucas, is that really you? Hi, Mom. I want to talk to everyone in person. Can you get Dad, Valeria, and Mateo together this Saturday? Yes. Yes, of course. Are you coming home? We've missed you so much, mijo. Things have been so hard without you. I'll pick you all up at 2 p.m. Be ready. Pick us up, Lucas. Where are you going to take us? Can we talk now? There's so much we need to explain. I hung up before she could ask any more questions. Saturday arrived gray and drizzly. Perfect weather for what I had planned. I drove my new car to their apartment complex, a matte black BMW M5 that had cost me more than Dad used to make in 2 years. The car was beautiful, powerful, and completely silent when it wanted to be. The kind of car that announced success without being flashy about it. I pulled up in front of their building and texted Valeria, I'm outside. They came out like they were sleepwalking. 4 people who used to carry themselves with the confidence of people who had someone else paying their bills, now looking like what they'd become. Working-class folks struggling to make ends meet. The transformation was stunning. Dad looked older, more tired, wearing a security guard uniform that hung loose on his shrinking frame. The night shift work had taken its toll, and he moved like someone whose body was breaking down. Mom had aged 5 years in 3 months. Her hair was grayer, her face lined with stress, and her clothes were the kind of practical, inexpensive things she'd never worn before. Valeria looked ordinary. No professional makeup, no designer clothes, just a regular person in regular clothes, looking worn down by regular life. The confidence that had once made her the center of attention was gone, replaced by the tired resignation of someone who'd learned what real work felt like. Mateo was the only one who looked somewhat the same, but even he seemed smaller, somehow less sure of himself. The arrogance of someone who'd never had to work for anything had been replaced by the humility of someone who discovered that food delivery in winter weather was harder than he'd imagined. They climbed into my car without saying a word, probably afraid that talking might make me change my mind about whatever this was. The car was immaculate inside. Leather seats, high-end sound system, that new car smell mixed with subtle luxury cologne. I could see them looking around, trying to process how I could afford something like this. I drove them through downtown, past the fancy restaurants Valeria used to frequent, past the office buildings where I conducted business, through the financial district where real money lived and worked. Nobody spoke during the drive, but I could feel them stealing glances at me, trying to figure out what had changed. Finally, I pulled into the parking garage of my building. The valet recognized me immediately. Good afternoon, Mr. Johnson. Will you need the car later today? No thanks, we'll be a while. I handed him the keys and led my family to the private elevator that served the top floors. I used my keycard, pressed 32, and watched their faces as we rose higher than any of them had ever been in the city. The elevator opened directly into my foyer, not a hallway, not a shared space, my own private entrance to my own private kingdom in the sky. They stepped out slowly, like they were entering a museum. The place was spotless, professionally decorated, and clearly expensive. The afternoon sun was streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting geometric patterns across the hardwood floors. Valeria was the first to speak. Whose place is this? Mine, I said simply. I led them through the living room, past the dining area that seated 8, past the kitchen with its granite countertops and professional-grade appliances, out onto the balcony where the entire city spread out below us like a map. They stood there staring, trying to process what they were seeing. The view was breathtaking. You could see for miles in every direction, watching tiny cars move through streets that looked like a model railroad set. Finally, Dad found his voice. I don't understand. How is this your place? You work at the steel plant. No, Dad. I quit the steel plant 3 years ago. I own 47 rental properties in 3 cities plus a property management company. I've been making more money in a month than you thought I made in a year. The silence was deafening. Mom sank into one of my patio chairs like her legs had given out. I don't understand, she whispered. So I explained everything. How I'd built my business from nothing while living in their house and paying their bills. How I'd kept it secret because I knew they'd find ways to spend everything I made. How I'd been planning my escape for years, waiting for the right moment. The right moment came when you threw me out of my own room for a con artist you'd known for 3 weeks. I continued a con artist who, by the way, had outstanding debts to 12 different creditors and was wanted for child support in 2 states. But you didn't bother to check any of that, did you? Valeria was crying now, but I wasn't done. Do you want to know what the funny part is? I was actually planning to help you all eventually. I was going to pay off the house, completely set up trust funds, maybe buy you a new place with a pool. I was going to be the family hero just like you always expected me to be. I walked back inside, and they followed like a funeral procession. But then you showed me exactly what I meant to you. Not a son, not a brother, just a source of money that you could discard the moment someone more interesting came along. I had them sit in my living room while I went to my office and retrieved 4 manila envelopes I'd prepared for this moment. Each envelope was labeled with a name and contained printouts I'd been saving for months. Valeria, I said, handing her the first envelope. These are screenshots of Carlos's social media posts about how easy it was to manipulate your family, including the photos he posted of himself in my room, captioned, "Living rent-free with these suckers." Her face went white as she scrolled through the printouts. There were dozens of them, photos of Carlos lounging in my former room, posts about stupid families who were easy to con, even pictures of him wearing dad's watches and mom's jewelry before he stole them. Mom. I continued handing her the second envelope. This is a complete financial breakdown of every dollar I contributed to this family over the past 13 years. The total comes to $247,000. That's not counting the interest I could have earned investing that money instead. Mom's hands were shaking as she looked at the numbers. Page after page of documented payments, receipts, bank transfers, and loan forgiveness. It was undeniable proof of just how much I'd been carrying the family financially. Dad, this is for you. The third envelope contained copies of every utility shutoff notice, every late payment fee, every foreclosure warning, all the consequences of treating your main income source like garbage. And Mateo, I said, handing him the last envelope. This is a list of every time you borrowed money from me and never paid it back. Every time you asked me to cover your expenses, every time you took something of mine without asking. It's quite a list. They sat there in my beautiful living room surrounded by more luxury than they'd ever experienced, holding the evidence of their own poor judgment. I want you to understand something, I said, standing by the windows with the city skyline behind me. I didn't do this to hurt you. I did this to teach you something you apparently never learned. That actions have consequences. Valeria looked up from her envelope, mascara running down her cheeks. Lucas, please. We're family. We made a mistake, but we're still family. Family, I repeated. You know what family does? Family doesn't throw you in a garage for a stranger. Family doesn't take your contributions for granted for over a decade. Family doesn't choose a con artist over their own blood. I walked to the front door and opened it, but here's what I'm going to do. Because unlike you, I actually understand what family means. I'm not going to leave you homeless or starving. I've set up a trust fund that will pay each of you $500 a month for the next 5 years. It's enough to keep you from being completely destitute, but not enough to go back to your old lifestyle. Mom started to say something, but I held up my hand. The money comes with conditions. You have to stay employed, all of you. You have to live within your means, and you have to acknowledge in writing that this is charity, not obligation. I don't owe you anything anymore. They started to get up, probably thinking this was negotiation time, but I shook my head. That's the offer. Take it or leave it. You have 1 week to decide. As they filed past me toward the elevator, each of them tried to say something. Apologies, explanations, promises to change. I listened politely and said nothing. The elevator doors closed, and I was alone again in my perfect apartment watching the sun set over the city I'd conquered, while they'd been busy taking me for granted.